Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday from me to you. This, of course, is your weekly look at all things talent acquisition, talent management, human resources, artificial intelligence. It's a little show we like to call Talent Experience Live, and I am your host, Devin Foster. I want to apologize. I know we're a little bit late today. We had some technical difficulties, and also our guest's limo was a little bit late pulling up here. He's a limo driver. It wasn't actually his limo, so that is why we were a little bit tardy, but I'm glad everyone stuck around because we have a fantastic episode for you today. We are talking all around career pathing and specifically how skills tie into that. So I can't wait to dive into the topic itself. But before that, we got to pay the bills around these parts. We got to keep the roof over our head. And we do that through our purpose here at Phenom, which is to help a billion people find the right job. It is the reason why we put on fantastic programs like this, including the webinar that was just on before that around workforce intelligence. And quite frankly, building out our intelligent talent experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond. Recruiters become next level productive when it comes to their day-to-day tasks, and managers are able to build better teams through data and analytics. Of course, all of this is powered by super slick artificial intelligence and machine learning. So if any of that interests you at all, head on over to phenom.com. You'll see a nice little banner at the top for AI Day, which was just a few weeks ago. That covered everything that you need to know about artificial intelligence. So definitely check that out. Check out the replay. And if you're traveling around the country or even the globe right now, stop by the Phenom booth, whether it's at HR Tech next week, SAP, Success Connect last week. We have Unleash World coming up and a plethora of others. So you can always check out our events tab at phenom.com as well. But now that the bills are paid, that box is checked. I want to get back to our main topic at hand, which is around career pathing. I think when all of us begin our careers, we have large aspirations of growing within an organization and continuing to really reap the benefits of staying at a company for a long time. But oftentimes that doesn't happen. I see stats on Twitter and X and LinkedIn all the time about the average tenure being 2 years or less for an employee. So today we're going to talk about how to fix that, how to have people stay a little bit longer at your organization and how skills ties into that. And I have a very special guest joining me today, part-time limo driver, full-time senior director of product marketing here at Phenom. I'd like to welcome on John Deal to the program. How are you, sir?
Well, sir, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I hope our audience is fans of Dumb and Dumber because I went a little heavy on the references there, and I want to apologize if anyone is not. But John, you've been here quite a while at Phenom.
I have indeed. I have.
I want to ask you before we dive into career pathing, skills, all of that. How long has it been that you've been a member of the Phenom team here?
I just celebrated my 4-year anniversary last month, actually.
Congratulations.
So I made the Olympics. Yeah.
You have. You are ready to win yet another gold medal and
right.
add it to your trophy case. John, I know we talked today. Both of us have had quite long careers here at Phenom and different stories, different paths, if you will. So if it's all right with you, I'd like to kind of go back and forth with questions on how our career paths have changed, how skills have tied into it. And I really want to, showcase how when people grow their careers, it's not a straight line. It's not the ladder system or anything along those lines. Is that okay with you to be a little bit different today?
I think it's I think people have their hands full with us too if they were expecting some type of ladder discussion, because we have we've certainly taken the circuitous route here.
We certainly have. Speaking of which, we put the not normal or the not and not normal here at Phenom. But you mentioned you've been here for about 4 years. How many roles have you had?
Let's see. I might have to take my shoes off. Let's see. So this is technically my 4th role.
Okay.
4th different role.
That's fair. That's fair. Different departments as a whole or different positions? What's the...
So yeah, I have had different positions. I've been in different departments. The Phenom has been fortunate in that we have grown over the past 4 years. The pandemic was cruel to us and then kind to us, like Niccolo. So as the company has grown, there's been a lot of different parts of the organization that have changed. We've reorganized. We've created new departments. And so I've had an opportunity not just to move within my department, but into other departments and even into brand new roles that never existed in the organization before.
That's exciting. My first tenure at Phenom, I think was 4 years, and then I took a sabbatical, I like to call it, and came back, and now I'm right around, I think, a year and a half. So I can completely relate that neither of us have had a straight line path. I think I've had 3 separate roles in 2 separate departments. So it's interesting that our paths have crossed so much. We make jokes in team meetings about how we've been involved in different departments, and we know people that other people don't know because Phenom's grown so much. But overall, has there been, for you at least, challenges from moving around in an organization like this, or have you kind of added it as a badge of honor to yourself?
No, I mean, I think that historically, a lot of people would say that they had to leave a company in order to find their next role. That seems to be the general trend that we hear. You see all the stats and things like that. So I am very fortunate that I have been given different opportunities in the organization, but also that I have been able to find them myself, right? We drink our own champagne or Kool-Aid, however, whatever the latest saying is. Somebody was on a call yesterday where they said the dogs drink. I don't know. They needed help with their analogies, but we sell HR software for employees, and we use that software internally, and it really does make things a lot easier when you sit down and you're like, oh, I've been doing this for 18 months or for 2 years or whatever, and you're like, what else is out there? Is there an opportunity, or do I need to look internally? And fortunately for us, because the software is front and center, a lot of people in the organization are very easily able to see like, oh, there is opportunity here, and I don't necessarily need to start shopping around.
Yeah. No, I mean, from my experience, I did shop around, right? Like I will be very frank with that. And there's the expression, which the grass isn't always greener on the other side. That's not a slight to the organization that I joined or anything like that, but it just wasn't a match for me. It was remote work. And although I had done I had a little bit of experience back in 2020. I don't know if you did with remote work, where I experimented with it and I thought, oh, this is great. I can wear sweatpants. Turned out, as we began to return to the office, it wasn't for me. I missed the culture that we've built here at Phenom. I missed but skills that I would pick up on from sitting next to someone who had a different skill set than I did, and things along those lines. So I can certainly relate to that aspect of, drinking our own Kool-Aid, where you're able to look across an organization and say, hey, I may not necessarily love my role right now, but I want to look and see what's here first, right? And a lot of organizations don't have that opportunity. You kind of sign up for the role that you're in, and then you're stuck there. Am I way off with that?
No, and in fact, I think you are a good example here. So let me turn the question back to you. Let's go back to your first role here at Phenom. And one of the things that happens is when you look at just somebody's role or their job title, you may miss out a lot on what they could do for the rest of the organization. So what was your first role here?
I was an SDR, or business development representative, depending on what type of organization you're at and what they like to call it. But yeah, sales, entry-level sales.
Yeah, and so within that job, you're doing a certain set of tasks every day, and it may or may not go into a progression to a team lead, right? Like that's what we see here from a lot of sales development representatives. They become a team lead, and then they might become a director of sales development, and then eventually we have a nice vice president of sales development. He's a lovely gentleman. But that's not the path you took, right? So where did you end up going?
So I went a roundabout way about it. I had done the role for a year, cranking out cold calls, sending out emails, attending events, and oddly enough, I started making memes about Phenom and posting them on LinkedIn, and they caught the eye of some individuals on the marketing team, and it was asked to me if I wanted to take that route. It wasn't that the traditional path wasn't offered to me, where it would be a team lead or work your way up throughout the sales organization, maybe become an account manager or account executive. That was still there, but it caught the attention of others. It was my skills that I kind of just volunteered that wouldn't show up, to your point, on a traditional SDR or BDR's resume, right? But I was the meme guy. That's
the memes.
ridiculous, right? It's
But I mean, you bring up a very valid point, which is if I look at your work experience, I'm not going to see meme. I'm going to see SDR, right? And so part of what's compelling about having the technology and capturing all the things that you're doing as part of that technology is that it turns up these skills, right? And it makes them visible to not only your manager, but also to other people in the organization, right? And so you now have an opportunity to move into an area that you might not have otherwise thought of.
Yeah.
Right. Like a lot of people, they come in and they're like, I'm going to be a product manager, and then I'm going to be a director, and then I'm going to be a vice president, and I'm going to be CEO. Right. And then I'm retiring, and then I'm done. Right. Like, so the mindset here and the power of what we do is that I think it really opens up that, oh, maybe it's not straight, maybe it's that way, right?
Well, and I think to your point, when we work with enterprise level organizations, right, Fortune 500, the biggest companies in the world, I know I've spoken to friends, coworkers and other things where they apply to positions because the company has a great reputation, right? It's a Fortune 500 company where they 401k match, people stay there for 20, 30 years, they retire. When you have an organization like that has built such a great infrastructure for retaining employees, sometimes people will apply to jobs that aren't their dream role. They just want to get their foot in the door for an organization. And then, before workforce intelligence and any of this was ever really talked about, they would do the old-fashioned networking, right? They'd go to the holiday parties and say, oh, I want to be in marketing, I'm going to hang out over here and talk to them about that, right? That was kind of how I moved about, because when I switched from SDR to marketing, I don't think we had a fully fleshed out workforce intelligence, right? That's how long I've been here. And now I look at it today and I think, oh, I can add my skills. Oh, I can add, what skills I work on the side, what I do for freelance, all sorts of things like that, and open myself up to other opportunities where now organizations don't necessarily have that, right? Am I way off there?
No, I think it's certainly relevant, and it's not only your ability to add skills, but it makes it easy for other people that know you to be able to contribute, right? So to endorse you for something you did, to give you praise for a TXL episode that you did with John Deal that was highly rated, right? So so it's not only the data, but it's also the simplicity of interaction, right? It's how you can control your destiny very simply versus, you have to go out and get a Christmas tree tie and maybe a jacket because you got to head downtown to the Christmas party and spend 4 or 5 hours trying to think of jokes that are suitable for work.
Absolutely. No, it is. And to your point, where colleagues can recommend you, I think that it takes a lot of the pressure off of employees, right? We talk about traditional talent acquisition, and people are going to put their best information on a resume, right? They are some folks may lie on a resume here or there. We don't encourage that behavior, but it has been done before. But when you're in an organization, you're kind of held to what work you do, right? What deliverables you have made, versus if you're helping somebody else out on the side, whether it's making memes, putting together a presentation or something like that, and they can add that skill on behalf of you, now you have somebody that's vouching for you in the organization, which I think goes a long way rather than just checking boxes that say, I'm a great salesperson, when you're like myself, and maybe you're not, because you don't like to get hung up on, right?
Yeah, I think it's a problem that a lot of organizations run into, right? Like, so job descriptions are usually marketing fluff, right? And the resume is the employee or candidate's answer to that, right? Like, right, this job is great. Well, I'm great, and so I should do this great job, right? And so validation becomes a real sticking point with a lot of organizations, and so that ability to not only network, but then have the fruits of that network be reflected on your skill profile, I think is super important, right? Not that we don't believe that your memes were funny. I'm sure we can see some of them. The internet never goes away, but
we'll see. Some of them weren't the best. I don't want all of them to be resurfaced, but yes, I do agree. That's a challenge. And I think there's been, with the influx of conversations around artificial intelligence, right? People are beginning to try and trick the machines and things like that, where it's copy and paste your resume or your job description, put it into a resume format, and then just throw your name on top. And it's really concerning for me working in this industry, because I had experience in the past as a recruiter, right? And I wasn't the best recruiter either, John, if I'm going to be honest. But one thing that I prided myself on was just having conversations with folks, right? And being able to get to know the real person and asking them if they can explain, what they did in their roles or what separates them from other individuals. And I think the ability to surface up your skills within a workforce intelligence and have you kind of be maybe floated to the top for a role that you didn't know you were considered for, and then you can have a conversation about it, see if it's right for you or if it's not. That's the beauty of this sort of technology, I think, when it comes to the future, where people are going to get opportunities that they may not have had before. Do you see it the same way, where we're not trying to trick the machines, we're trying to use them in a way that helps us see everyone on a level playing field?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of FUD out there, and some of it is not FUD. Some of it is legit. Like, people are using this the wrong way.
Yeah.
I think you had Josh on a couple of weeks ago where he was explaining some of the fallacies of using it for legal practices. But one of the beautiful things that AI can do is it can find trends that you can't. Right? It's chewing through a ton of data. So even you are now our social director, right? But what would you have put on your skills or resume, right, that might have led to social director? Would it have been, LinkedIn post or memes or graphical design or whatever? Maybe you just would have put like copywriter, right? Because you're a pretty good writer. The machine can go out and say, well, if he's a copywriter, then he could probably put together marketing communications. And if he can put together marketing communications, then he could probably put together digital communications, and then get you into the door a little bit faster by inferring things that you probably have and can do that you might not, just like, you wouldn't have been that detailed in what you're putting down. Right?
Absolutely.
So
and it's interesting you raise that point, because I've seen this trend on social media where I've noticed a lot of recruiters hopping on TikTok, hopping on Instagram, right, sharing their stories. And the reason why they're finding success is because they're used to talking to people. They're used to expanding on their thoughts, thinking on the fly, to, quite frankly, market themselves to attract candidates in the door. If you put in recruiter into a system, in the old days, it would be all right. They can look at resumes, they can, click people through, they can make phone calls. They're probably pretty good with communication. Now it's all of these other inferred skills where you could be tech support because you're interviewing people across, the country, right? And they're having issues with XYZ platform because they always meet on this platform or whatever that may be. Those are skills that are added to a profile that could help them in their next career path. Am I way wrong with that? Like, skills, I think, are changing so rapidly that the only way to keep up with them and create a skills ontology for your organization is to leverage artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to what you were talking about during the pandemic, where we were experimenting remotely, um, a lot of people had to become more comfortable with video than ever before,
Yep.
right? And so they couldn't hide behind just a phone, right? So I think that when you look at it from a recruiter standpoint, like we have a woman here, Ellen Hughes, who she comes from a recruiting background also, and she is now in a solution consulting role because she's now developed these skills between, being in front of a video and presenting to a group of people that you might not have presented that way before. It might have just been a phone call where you could mute it and you could look up stuff real quick, right?
Yeah.
Like now you got to be buttoned up.
Mhm.
Not that Ellen is always buttoned up. I don't, so there's a new skill that was learned that can now be applicable somewhere else. And you're right. Who's manually making those assumptions?
Yeah.
Nobody, right? Because it takes a huge amount of data to look through to say, okay, there's the trend. Let's make that inference. Let's get them over.
Absolutely. And I think to get back to kind of the career pathing aspect of this, most people change jobs because they're not happy, right? Like they're not enjoying the role that they're in. So when I think of myself in my role, I wasn't happy cold calling, right? That's me personally. Some people love it. I see it online. They are happy to pick up the phone and do it. My wife is still in a sales industry. She loves it, right? It just wasn't for me. I found that when people kind of are stuck in a role that maybe they're not too happy with, they're hesitant to put down some of those skills because they don't want to be boxed in right from that. And I want to ask you from a perspective, I'm sure that not all of your jobs you were over the moon in love with, right? But are there advantages to maybe being in a role where you can add skills that will help set you up for a new position like you found here at Phenom? I'm not going to ask you if you hated any of your jobs, but I'm sure there's one. Is there an example where you may have taken a skill from something you didn't anticipate and are now applying it to your senior level director role?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think you're right. I think sometimes, just like you said, people will go work at a company just to have that company on their resume. I
Mhm.
think sometimes some people will take a position because it has a certain title or certain,
Yeah.
it's in a certain department
Mhm.
because ultimately they want to end up somewhere in that department,
Yeah.
right? So, I think that I think that that happens a lot, and I think that that's it, I think it's important for, as you said, for people to understand that that happens,
Mhm.
but that it's not something that you should view as a detriment
Yeah.
because you're constantly learning,
Mhm.
right? And even if you aren't remembering all the great things that you did, the machine is,
Yeah.
right? So when even though you might have hated cold calling, that skill set is there,
Mhm.
and whether you're proficient at it or not could be argued. But the skill set is there, and even though you might not want to put it on a resume because you're looking for a different path, if the machine knows, it can help say, well, he did this and this is applicable to this
Yeah.
because.
Yeah. I mean, we don't just see it in the traditional office environment either. I have a colleague who his brother's a policeman, right? Thank you for your service. But while he was going through the academy, there were a number of his counterparts that were there who had no aspirations to become policemen. They were trying to get their EMT certification and those, kind of certifications in order to become firemen, right? Where we see people may take positions that it doesn't align with their end goal. They may take that, business development role because it doesn't, and they don't want to become a sales executive or anything along those lines, but they want to add some of those skills to their resume or land and expand within an organization, which I think is exciting for a company, right? To have a reputation where it's, hey, you're going to come here, do this particular role, but we're going to offer you something as well that's more than just a paycheck at
Yeah.
the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So I got a little off topic there. I know you wanted to ask me some questions as well, so I'll hand the
No,
floor back
no,
over to
it's
you.
okay. I actually, it's funny because um, I was an engineer when I started.
Yes.
And now I can't imagine being an engineer again. Right.
Mhm.
But you take,
Yeah.
you take what you learn from that and you help, it helps build your career.
Yeah.
So, um, Yeah, I do have questions, and I wrote them down.
Perfect.
I didn't write.
He doesn't even have a pen anymore.
So let's talk about your role after, just to kind of draw a line from your skills.
Yeah.
So you were an SDR.
Yep.
You start doing some of these social posts and things like that,
Mhm.
and you didn't leap right to social director. Nope. You stopped in the middle,
Yep.
right? And where'd you stop?
I stopped at product marketing management.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
And so, so tell us a little bit about that journey from SDR to product marketing.
I think the journey itself, to your point, it's not a traditional leap, right? But the skills that I learned from being in business development were easily applicable. I was on the phone every day talking about our product, understanding how to pitch it essentially to end users, right? And I had come from a background of recruiting. So I spoke their language a little bit, maybe not fluently, but I could get to the train station and to the nicest restaurant in town and then leave and fly home. But that transition, I think, was easier for me because I was fluent in the technology, right? I knew how to talk about it, which is what product marketing is, right? So I used memes and used social media to kind of get attention for us, which was still a sales tactic for me. I wasn't doing it to try and boast my own resume, but I caught the attention of product marketing. I had traveled to some of our events and things like that, which is a huge aspect of marketing, as we know. So I got to see the inner workings there, and I traveled as somebody who would scan leads. We all will see those next week. You and I will see those next week at HR Tech. But that was the transition for me and why it was applicable. It's not a traditional career path, but because I was marketing our product already from a sales capacity, when it came to hopping on webinars or starting TXL or any of those things, I was already doing that. Just now the format has changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it's especially applicable because as somebody who's cold calling, you need to get the value across as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And when you move into product marketing, that automatically becomes a skill that you can leverage because it's like, all right, what is the best pitch that I can give to our SDRs and to our sales team so that they can 8-second value it, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, and the other thing is, and so along the same lines of SDR, one of my early jobs when I was in college was I had to call alumni and ask them if they would like to contribute to, which, as a 19-year-old getting abused by 40 and 50-year-old folks on the phone was, but being an SDR, being in those types of position also, I think, gives you thick skin.
Yeah.
And so it equips you for something like this, where we are talking to millions.
At least thousands on a weekly basis.
At
People
least,
don't get
right.
credit.
Well, Tom.
Yeah. Tom. Yeah. Shout out to Tom. But yeah.
But so right. And so I agree with you that it wasn't a traditional path to take, but some of those skills that you learned, when you look at it at just a skill level, it certainly makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, those totally would work in product marketing versus looking at it at a title level, right? And that's when we talk about navigating career paths and navigating the skills landscape, that's kind of what we're talking about, is that you are no longer just a collection of titles. You are now also these skills. And so you as an employee, I think, need to think about that, but organizations really need to think about that. If you're still looking at job titles, then you're missing out on a lot.
Yeah. I want to tie it into kind of a sports analogy, right? You look at somebody like Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo, these mammoth human beings who are traditionally would be just centers, right? They would stay in the key, rebound like Shaq did back in the day. But they've collected this plethora of skills where now we watch basketball, it's positionless. You see the same thing in football where there are quote unquote weapons, right? Who can play from the running back position, who can play from wide receiver. If I'm getting too analytical with sports, I apologize. But I'll apply it back to, human resources and really jobs as a whole. Positions are changing, right? I think everyone looks at their team, and rather than looking for a title. They're looking for A players, right? Our boss, Jonathan Dale, talks about it all the time, where I'm looking for somebody who's willing to step up and maybe do something that's out of their comfort zone, not because I like to see them struggle in any ways, but I want to see what they're capable of. I want to add those skills to that individual so that if they do plan on graduating from Phenom or do plan on taking their career elsewhere, they can roll with, quite frankly, any of the punches, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what is tossed at them, they're not going to panic under pressure. And I think that's where work as a whole is headed, where people are less attracted to job title and more attracted to what skills is this person going to bring? What is our department missing? Is it a videographer that can also do a little bit of Photoshop or can also create their own content? You're not going to find that in a particular job description, right? It doesn't exist.
Right.
I've
been searching for it. Here at Phenom.
Exactly. But I think quote unquote positionless workers, right? There will always be positions where I think there have to have specific titles. But as we shift towards internet culture, working from home, working from the office, cross department functionality, it's turning into positionless work, right? It sounds awful to say it that way. So marketing will have to work on the naming there.
We'll edit this part.
Yeah, but that's where I think we're truly headed.
Yeah, well, it's like to go back to your sports analogy, it's like Moneyball.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Can he get on base?
Yeah.
Right? Well, he doesn't play first base. Yeah. We'll teach him to play first base. All we care is can he get on base, yes. Right? So, right, it's very skills oriented, and that's like the title part of it can, in a lot of cases, can be taught. Yep. You were not a traditional product marketer, but you came on because you had skills that you could leverage to do product marketing.
I don't think I've been a traditional anything, if we're being honest, John. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think we're headed that way in the future, and you see it even at the C level, right? Where folks are out giving TED Talks and out pitching organizations' point of views to customers, to clients, to prospects. I don't think that was ever traditionally in C levels things. I mean, you watch movies from back in the 70s and 80s, all they did was drink scotch in their office and fly on private jets. Now they're, on the ground floor, they're working with people. They're, talking with entry-level folks. They're doing all of this that isn't in their job title or job description.
Yeah. And like that is really the human side of giving people visibility.
Yeah.
Right. That is the human side of this is our culture. You have opportunity here.
Yeah.
And so, I think our main point here is like, don't skip on the human side, but don't forget to supplement the human side with some technology that can help people get there. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think technology is the only way that it's going to be possible, right? Because it's all changing so fast. Generative AI wasn't even a thing 6 months ago. Now we're going to see skills where it's prompt for generative AI, right? Where it's image creation through Midjourney or whatever, that may be. That wasn't a thing ever.
Right.
I didn't think it was ever going to be a thing, but we're here now, right? And we talk so much around content, I think, as a whole, where there's webinars coming up about it. We have speaking sessions where it's creating content to bring in talent acquisition. That turns into creating content to retaining employees. That turns into, creating content for growing your position. I think everyone across every business is, quite frankly, a content creator. Whether you're in customer success, you're typing up emails. That email can easily be a video now because we're all used to being on Zoom and things like that. So I'll hand the floor back over to you before I ramble any further.
No, but I think it's an important point, and I think it all comes back to: would somebody have said at the beginning of your career journey, "Hey, Devin, here's where you're going to go next, and it's got to be product marketing," and then after your sabbatical, here's where you're going to, right? Like, just try to think about it from that perspective. Could somebody have sat there and been like, okay, I think this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity. It was a collection of exposing skills,
Yep.
networking, which is always an important element to career growth. And just a little bit of luck, right?
Yeah.
So
it's also I don't know from your perspective, or from my perspective, it's challenging to have those conversations where I don't want to, potentially take the next step in this role, right? Where technology could alleviate some of that as you input your skills and kind of map out where you'd like to go, or see if you want to jump from sales into marketing, what skills you have to hone in on in order to make that happen, right? Which then when you sit down with your manager, whoever it may be, the conversation becomes a little bit easier. Not because they know where you want to go, but you can say, hey, I have aspirations to get into the marketing department. I know I'm missing in these sort of skills and areas. Can you help facilitate that, conversation for me? Is there any sort of things I can gig work? Remember we talked about gig work for forever? Are there any sort of gigs that I can pick up along the way to add those to my tool belt?
Yeah, and I think it's that what the technology also does is it gives visibility across the organization. So some employees are scared to apply for internal jobs because they feel like their manager will get upset.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're going to get fired. Right. But if you have that skill visibility across the organization, then the HR team understands, like, okay, here's this person that could be a good fit here. Maybe I can help them along the way.
Yep.
And honestly, managers have that visibility too. Everyone's speaking from the same language, right? Yep. It's not qualitative at this point. It's more quantitative and data driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, it helps across the board. It not only helps you to see what opportunities are available, but it helps other people help you.
Yep.
Help you. Yeah.
Help a billion
Yes.
is where you were going
That's
with that. Yes,
yes.
Absolutely. No, and I think it stems back to company culture or purpose, right? Like you have to have those, I wouldn't say ground rules, but kind of examples of folks where it's all right. You can spend a year in this role. You can spend 2 years in this role, and then we'll, look for your next position, right? Or something. I don't think either of us are encouraging folks to go apply for a role and then 2 weeks later be like, all right, I'm going to hop ship and jump to each department, which is, I think, a fair question to kind of segue into. And I know we're probably getting up on time here, but this is a great conversation, so we can go all day.
We started late.
Yeah, we did. We did start late. Yeah.
The jerk before us.
Playing with house money.
Yeah.
How long were you in each of your roles? Because I think that's an interesting question for the non-traditional career path, right? Most of the time, people may spend 2-3 years. 4 years.
4 years, 4 roles.
4 roles. So
I was fortunate when I first joined that I was promoted pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But then I spent roughly 2 years in the other roles.
Mm-hmm.
So my current role, I've been here for 3 months.
Yep.
Right. Still fresh and new. But going back to what you said about gigs and projects, that's an interesting way where people can experiment, can participate in other areas of the company without necessarily moving. Because I agree with you. You can't 2 weeks in. It's not, if you're posted for jobs, then something's probably wrong, and no career pathing tool is probably going to help you.
No.
So, but project work and participating in other areas of the organization is something that you could do while you're doing your quote unquote day job.
Yeah.
And really experience all those other different areas of the company. So, it doesn't have to be so black and white that you're in this position and then you're in this position. Yeah. Right. And as we talked about, you used the term positionless.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. Your title is your title, but ultimately it's your set of skills, and how can I, selfishly use them as a manager of another department? Yeah. How can the organization use them? How can you use them to leverage yourself into future opportunities?
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. I want to ask you kind of a strange question, but we talked a little bit before about, roles that you may not have enjoyed previously. You said, yes, that there have been skills. I think you used an engineering as an example that you can apply to your current role today. I want to ask you from a personal level, because this is about company culture, right? And creating an area where employees want to grow and they want to change departments and they want to add different skills. They want to be there for the long haul. have there been skills where you've learned at work and you've been able to apply them to your personal life or things like that? Because I don't think that's talked about enough when we discuss jobs, right? We talk about how we spend more time with our colleagues than our families. We didn't in 2022, 2021, whatever. But we're sort of getting back to that time frame where we spend a lot of time with the people that we work with and doing work. Are you able to, apply some of those skills to your personal life that maybe would help somebody stick it out in an organization, or not an organization, a position, excuse me, for a little bit longer before they find that dream role?
Yeah, I can give you two examples that I think are super helpful. The first one is project management, and where I found that applicable is dealing with contractors when you're having work done on your house. Because I find that a lot of them are very nebulous about what's going to happen when and when they're going to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So being involved with project management at work has allowed me to kind of go back to those folks and say, okay, let's talk about this a little bit differently, right?
Yeah.
And even set milestones with it, right? Okay, like, yeah, you're going to be done in the spring. How about when is this door going to be in? So it stops raining in the living room, right? So I think that's a big one.
Yep.
And then I will tell you that being a manager of people does give you skills for being a parent, and probably vice versa. No, I'm not. I'm saying that anyone that reported to me was childish, but I think being a manager of people and understanding that like there's another side to a conversation, right? And that you need to be open to other people's input of what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a parent, like that's sometimes you're like, I'm doing it, right, right, but you get a very healthy relationship with your kid if you're like, listen, can you give me some direct feedback? Can you enter Lattice and give me some direct feedback on whether the punishment I gave you was
fair?
Right.
That's I love that. And managing and parenting, I heard this on an episode of TXL a few years ago. They're the two things where it's socially accepted that because you've been managed, you can manage, right? Because you've been parented, you can parent. And there isn't really training for either of them. There's management training and you can take classes for parenting, but you have to get your hands dirty. You have to do some of those things, which ties back into figuring out what works for you and what your role is. The last question that I want to ask you, and then I'll let you ask me any final thoughts or any questions that you may still have, is when we talk about career pathing, it's easy to say, yeah, I zigzagged my way through my career. I want to ask you, has your goal for where you want to end up or your aspirations changed along the way as well? When you were an engineer, did you want to take that trajectory to senior engineer or wherever it may end up? And then you figured out that wasn't for you, and then you shifted. And what does that look like from a mental perspective, right? Where you may go into an interview and say, hey, I want to be XYZ position. I want to be CMO one day. But things change, right? How does that go about?
Yeah, it's funny because I couldn't wait to be done college. Like I was done going to class and taking tests and stuff like that, right? But as I've aged, the desire to keep on learning and like just picking up new things has kind of reared its ugly head again. And so when I first started my career, I might have said things like, I want to be a CTO or CEO or things like that. My perspective has changed because I'm more interested in like, I'd like to learn more about social media. I'd like to learn more about SEO and what that, right? I'd like to learn more about creating digital content, So for me, it's been a shift more into, less about what's my next title going to be and more about, okay, what things can I learn to keep my job interesting every day, right? So I talked to a sales guy a long time, not to disparage sales, right? We already made that disclaimer, but he told me, he's like, I did all my hard work in the first 5 years of my career, and then I've just been rinse and repeating at every company I go to. And I'm like, I mean, that's brilliant. But for me, it's just like, I like the challenge of okay, what's going to happen today? And do I even know how to make it happen?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
So
that makes sense. It's funny that you mentioned we're done with college. I was as well. I remember walking into my career office at shout out Flagler College. And they said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I told them that I wanted to wear a suit every day to work. And now I dress like this to work. So things change, aspirations change, and goals change, right? As little as 2 years ago, if you would have asked me that I would be in social media working on that, I probably would have told you no, right? And I loved product marketing management, but I found a new passion along the way working within a marketing team. So
yeah,
it's exciting stuff. You got anything for me?
I got one last question for you. Then
Fire
do
away.
we have time?
We got plenty. We got all day.
So now, like you are, you have a young child.
Yes.
Right. So as a father, what is your career advice going to be to your child?
Luckily she's only 2, so I have a little bit of time.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's to find what you're passionate about. Don't be afraid to experiment with roles, because I look at some people who may have mentored me in the past who hated their job, right? Money's an easy thing to attract folks, but what's that old expression? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I think there's a happy balance there, right? Find a role that is able to keep you happy, healthy, and comfortable, but also pay the bills, right? I don't need her to try and become a TikTok influencer or something like that. So that's where it would be. It's get education, and even that is different than it was previously, and be happy with what you do, but don't be afraid to change roles. Don't be afraid to change jobs. Hopefully you find a company where you're willing to stay the long haul.
Think about the fact that TikTok influencer could be a major at college.
Influencer, I think, is a major at some schools.
But
then again, so is like Hogwarts. So I don't know if that industry is, quite frankly, booming right now. And plus, my daughter's going to be a soccer star, so I don't have to worry about this.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, Project Mbappe. But no, I think it's a fair point, and it's something that we all have to self-reflect on, right? It may not be your child, it may not be even a family member, it just might be somebody close to you, and the skills that you learn along your career will help you have conversations with significant others, with parents who may be frustrated at work or wherever it may be. I've had, career advice conversations with my dad where he shared things, and I've shared things with him from my experiences. He's a UPS truck driver. He does not care about HR tech or anything along those lines. But at the end of the day, when we look at work, it's a people business, right? You are working with colleagues, you are working with upper management, you are working with all of these folks, and you have to be able to utilize your skills to grow and find the position that makes you happy, healthy, and also keeps a roof over your head.
Absolutely.
All right. I think I'd put a nice little bow on that there.
I think you wrapped it up nicely. You might have a new skill.
Yeah, let's add it there. John, this conversation has been one of my favorites. I have a list of questions written behind the camera. I think I asked 2 of them.
I don't.
Yeah, you pulled out your phone. We got a little flustered there for a moment. But
this was Candy Crush. That's still a thing? I don't even know.
I don't believe so, but they're still selling ads, I'm sure, someplace. This has been an absolute blast. We're both going to be at HR Tech next week.
Stop by the booth. Yes.
If you are there, you did a lot to put on AI Day as well. So head on over to phenom.com where you can learn about AI Day as well as the upcoming events. It's right on the banner up there. And in the meantime, I hope everybody has a happy, healthy, fantastic Thursday. John, I wish you nothing but the best. I know I've taken up all of your time. And we'll see you next Thursday.
Yeah, sounds good. Everybody stay safe.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one. Bye.